Hi everyone, good Thursday morning and welcome to GoLocal Live. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for tuning in for this very important and intriguing segment for those of you who might be thinking about a new career path or continuing education. I'd like to welcome on Lucas DuClos. He is faculty at the Providence College Continuing Education School of Continuing Education. Now he teaches interdisciplinary studies, English and writing, master's from Harvard University, undergrad at URI, co-founder of Roosterlands, a digital writing community, and just really excited to have him on as we start this partnership with the School of Continuing Education and getting folks to think about maybe a new career path. Lucas, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a very exciting time. Obviously, a year now into the pandemic, a lot of folks facing a lot of uncertainty, especially in the employment arena. Now, you at the School of Continuing Education teach writing, English, interdisciplinary studies. You yourself have had quite the career from in the classroom to developing curricula. So let's start a little bit with your career and obviously how it positions you to help students think about their own.
Yeah, so I've been truly blessed with a family and lifelong friends and coworkers who are all sort of amateur and professional pivoteers. I've created that at PC for others. So the course that I developed at PC is basically base camp for people who have either decided to embark on the next phase of their career journey or who just have become actively curious and vocal about it. There we get into what I call reflection labs, and where we really muster our resources for the challenging landscape that we each have ahead of us as we pivot. It's the 26-year-old who has put everything into their life as a musician, but has an experience working with young people and realizes she wants to work as a counselor. Or it's the firefighter who has literally pulled people out of burning buildings and has delivered babies and decides to pursue medicine. Or someone who's raised a family and even their grandchildren and wants to be at the table for this conversation because they just love learning and have always wanted to go to college.
You just made the point, of course, this is completely wide-ranging.
It's totally wide-ranging, and the area or the country, or have been working successfully for decades. It's the same kind of sort of diverse cross-section of this great community that we live in and around Providence and Rhode Island. Really amazing people join us in this cohort, and so the course is really defined by the conversation that we have about the next chapter. We deal with a cognitive toolkit, which is really the same for all of us. You're ready to get your hands dirty, maybe take a job you thought you were above as you make the pivot, gain a balance of healthy selfishness and community engagement, and really growth mindsets over fixed mindsets. And finally, just sort of practice, and I'll get to that in a moment. So the whole experience is really a conversation, but it's an intentional conversation. And that means that it's meant to do something. Which is really influence momentum and action, because whether you're pivoting within your career or into one that's altogether different, or even if you just feel kind of stuck and want change, it's action that you're ultimately coming to us for.
And you just made that point again. It can be if you know another career path that you'd like to go on, or just haven't even decided what it might be, but you don't like where you are at this point. Or you might need a new employment opportunity. Now, again, you developed this curricula, so I want to talk with you a little bit about that. It has very specific stages, 3 in particular. How did you come about coming up with this to, again, position students to move on to that next step?
Yeah, so I have, I've looked at my own career as sort of a listener, and I have been listening to people tell their own stories, people who are in preschool, people who are in, throughout the educational journey at all different levels. And then finally, really lately into higher education and adult ed. And, so I've found sort of designs that are similar in everybody's story about where they've been, where they are now, and where they want to go. And before I get into these 3 steps, I just want to put a phrase out there by the futurist Alvin Toffler, who said, you've got to think about big things while you're doing small things so that all the small things go in the right direction. So we're going to look at big things for a moment, then we're going to get into some really small things. And then in the third step, I'll tell you how we sort of come up into the middle so we have those two perspectives in mind.
Okay, I like it. Let's go ahead.
Okay, so step one is really tell your story and ask other people to tell you theirs. This part of the course is really kind of like a 30,000 foot up kind of thinking. We do a lot of storytelling. We examine and learn from other people's experience pivoting in their lives and work. And it's not just work that we pivot in. We're doing that in our lives, and we reflect on our own familiar experiences doing that because we have before. So how do people get where they are? What are the common denominators in those stories? We get a close look at Joseph Campbell's monomyth, the hero's journey, to look at the design these kinds of stories all share. And if the hero's journey doesn't ring a bell for too many of our viewers, just think The Wizard of Oz, Harry Potter, Black Panther, Star Wars, Home Alone. These are all adventures in which which have a common structure, where a character as Joseph Campbell would say, ventures from the world of common day into a region of supernatural wonder. So these are basically fish out of water stories, fish who were either thrown out of the water or who threw themselves out of it. And that's, I'll come back to that in a moment, that kind of call to action. We discuss the hero's journey stories that have actually stuck with us, whether they're films or TV shows, biographies of people who are in the field we're thinking about going into, or novels, children's books, or stories handed down in your own family. We bring these fish out of water stories to our conversation to remind each other and ourselves that there's a well-worn path there in this sort of this world of wonder, this special world, this new place that we're going into. So, you're in and the hero's journey has stages which are very familiar. I'm just going to focus on some of the earlier ones. So you're in your ordinary everyday world. There's some sort of call to action that happens. It could be a pandemic. I think we've all seen that a year ago, pretty much this week, there was a pretty serious call to action that's really started to emerge in our collective conscience. And, or it could just be that you're watching a video of a guy like me who sounds like he's really talking to you right now at home about these ideas that you've had. You could refuse the call. You could say, no, no, no. And we do that. We push down that sort of, and we did that when the pandemic hit. Like, is this really happening? I can't, I can't do these things that the world's asking me to do. Or you could cross the threshold, and with some sort of aid that comes along. And usually if you take that bold step, mighty forces just come to your aid. You cross the threshold, and you'll find there's lots of allies who are around you who are willing to take that journey with you. So, once you're familiar with how these stories and other journeys, these adventure stories work and what the plot structure is, we identify the moments in our own past when we became fish out of water and adapted to these moments of pivot. So there are several takeaways from this part of the course where we're doing a lot of storytelling, listening to other people tell their stories. One, when you look at how doubt and fear and failure are inherent in so many success stories, including your own, you can begin to kind of remove the sting from setbacks and failures and look at them like markers on your path. And that's going to be important when you're pivoting, because there's going to be moments where this is hard. And, there's lots of things going on in our lives that we have to juggle while we're doing this. The second takeaway from this part of the course is that telling your own stories is an essential piece of pivoting. You have to market yourself. You have to make this idea you have